21 miles. That is the number that is currently holding the entire global economy hostage. 21 miles of dark, mine-laced, contested water between Iran and Oman. And right now, as you are watching this, the most powerful navy in the history of human civilization cannot fully cross it. Washington is not monitoring the situation. Washington is not considering its options. Washington is paralyzed strategically, diplomatically, and militarily paralyzed by a country it declared victory over. Before this video goes any further, I need you to drop your opinion in the comments right now. Do you think the United States has already lost the Strait of Hormuz? And if you haven't subscribed to Borderline News yet, you are genuinely going to miss what is coming, because what is unfolding in those 21 miles is not just a military standoff. It is the most consequential geopolitical trap laid in the 21st century. Hit subscribe. Let's get into it. Before February 28, 2026, the Strait of Hormuz was open, moving roughly 25% of the world's seaborne oil through its narrow passage every single day. Then, in a single coordinated 24-hour sequence, the United States and Israel launched Operation Epic Fury, striking Iranian military facilities, nuclear sites, and leadership in what was supposed to be a decisive war-ending hammer blow. Washington's strategic calculation was simple: decapitate Iran's command structure and the Islamic Republic would collapse or capitulate within days. That calculation was catastrophically, embarrassingly, historically wrong, because what the Pentagon's war planners did not fully model, what the intelligence community seemingly failed to anticipate, was that Iran had spent decades preparing not for the first 72 hours of a war, but for the weeks and months after the strikes, when the real power play would begin. On March 2nd, 2026, a senior IRGC official confirmed on the record that the Strait of Hormuz was closed, subsequently threatening any ship that attempted to pass through it. Let that land, not disrupted, not contested, closed, the most critical maritime choke point on planet Earth, shut down by a country that had just absorbed one of the most intense aerial bombardment campaigns since World War II. And here is the brutal mathematics that Washington simply cannot escape. Before the war, the Strait of Hormuz facilitated approximately 20% of global oil flows, roughly 20 million barrels of oil per day, and 20% of the global liquefied natural gas trade. It is the only maritime exit from the Persian Gulf, making it an irreplaceable choke point. There is no detour. There is no bypass. There is no alternative route that even comes close to compensating for Hormuz. Iran knew this. Iran always knew this. And when the moment came, the IRGC executed their Hormuz doctrine with a precision that left the entire Western strategic establishment in a state of stunned, speechless, jaw-dropping shock. Now let's talk about the weapon that made this possible, because the real masterstroke wasn't missiles, it wasn't drones, though we'll get to those. The masterstroke was the oldest naval weapon in the modern arsenal, the sea mine. Iran's mining campaign, which U.S. intelligence detected from March 10th, represents the first large-scale naval mining of an international waterway since Iraq mined Kuwaiti waters during the 1990-91 Gulf War, and the first time a state has mined a strait through which its own adversaries' energy supplies flow while simultaneously negotiating a ceasefire that requires that strait to reopen. Read that sentence again and let it sink in. Iran was sitting at the diplomatic table discussing peace while its IRGC Navy was actively laying mines in the same waterway the ceasefire demanded be opened. This is not duplicity. This is not dishonesty. This is a masterclass in asymmetric geopolitical judo. The IRGC's mine arsenal predates this conflict by decades. Iran began stockpiling naval mines during the Iran-Iraq War, importing Chinese-designed EM-52 rocket-propelled rising mines and Soviet-era contact mines, and developing indigenous variants through its own defense industry. The EM-52 is not a crude device. It is a sophisticated rocket-propelled weapon that sits on the seabed and rises to intercept a target when triggered. It does not float. You cannot easily spot it. Your sonar doesn't reliably catch it. And in the murky, high current, low visibility waters of the Strait of Hormuz, 34-kilometer passage that narrows to just 2 usable shipping lanes of approximately 3 kilometers each, these weapons transformed a navigable strait into a strategic killing field. The USS Samuel B. Roberts nearly sank after striking a single Iranian contact mine in 1988, a mine that tore a 15-foot hole in the hull and broke the keel. Now the IRGC has hundreds of them in the water, and even they don't know exactly where all of them are. According to a Friday report by the New York Times citing U.S. officials, Iran lost track of some of the mines it planted in the Strait of Hormuz and is therefore unable to fully open the strait, even if it wanted to. This is the detail that should make every energy market analyst, every shipping CEO, and every national security advisor in the world go completely cold. Tehran cannot fully deliver on its own commitments because its own military instrument has escaped its control. The IRGC planted a minefield so extensive, so aggressive, so poorly charted during the heat of war that the entity that put them there cannot map them all. The strait is not just dangerous, the strait is unknowably dangerous, and that is a different category of threat entirely. Let's now zoom out and look at the geopolitical map, because what is happening at Hormuz does not exist in isolation. It exists at the epicenter of a shifting, realigning, fracturing world order that is moving with staggering speed. China moved to block the Scarborough Shoal in the South China Sea while U.S. efforts were focused on reopening the Strait of Hormuz. Do you understand the strategic significance of that timing? While every American carrier group, every destroyer, every knife fish underwater drone, and every CENTCOM intelligence asset is locked onto a 21-mile stretch of water between Iran and Oman, Beijing quietly tightened its grip on another critical maritime choke point on the other side of the planet. This is not coincidence. This is coordinated geopolitical pressure executed with the calm precision of actors who have studied Washington's capacity for simultaneous multi-theater engagement and concluded correctly that it is finite. Russia's Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov warned against the U.S. blockade of the Strait of Hormuz, saying it would likely hurt global trade markets. Russia and China vetoed Bahrain's UN Security Council proposal, calling on states to ensure safety in the strait, saying the resolution was biased against Iran and that it was the wrong message to send. And their decision was praised by the Iranian ambassador while being condemned by the U.S. and French ambassadors. The veto architecture of the UN Security Council has now been weaponized into a full-spectrum diplomatic shield around Iran. Moscow and Beijing are not intervening militarily. They don't need to. They simply deny legitimacy to every Western-backed mechanism designed to resolve this crisis, forcing the United States to act unilaterally, which then generates its own cascade of international condemnation, coalition fractures, and legal challenges. Spain, under Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez, closed its airspace to U.S. planes being used in the Iran conflict and disallowed the U.S. from utilizing jointly operated military bases in southern Spain in the war effort, making it one of Europe's loudest critics of the U.S.-Israeli campaign. British Prime Minister Keir Starmer said the United Kingdom would not join Trump's blockade of Iranian ports. French President Emmanuel Macron announced preparations for a peaceful multinational mission aimed at restoring freedom of navigation in the Strait of Hormuz, a strictly defensive mission separate from the warring parties. Read that language carefully. France and Britain are explicitly distancing themselves from the American operation. They are positioning themselves as neutral arbiters, not coalition partners. The Western alliance that launched Operation Epic Fury less than 7 weeks ago is visibly, publicly, and humiliatingly fracturing over what comes next. Now let's go to the military chessboard, because this is where the strategic humiliation of American conventional power becomes most acute, and where Iran's asymmetric doctrine delivers its most crushing blow. The U.S. Fifth Fleet, based in Naval Support Activity Bahrain with around 8,000 personnel, is currently enforcing a blockade and thousands of U.S. troops in the Middle East are on high alert as the standoff raises the specter of a new round of combat. The U.S. military currently has the USS Abraham Lincoln aircraft carrier, 11 destroyers, and the USS Tripoli amphibious group operating in the Middle East, with the USS Gerald Ford and additional destroyers deployed in the Mediterranean. This is an extraordinary concentration of American naval power. And yet, and this is the single most important strategic reality of this entire crisis, all of that firepower cannot safely transit a 21-mile strait, cannot clear a minefield of unknown size, and cannot force a country to open a waterway without triggering the very ceasefire collapse that would plunge global energy markets into catastrophic freefall. The Knifefish UUV, the primary autonomous mine hunting system in the U.S. inventory, achieved initial operational capability in 2023 and has been tested in exercises, but April 2026 marks its first deployment into a contested, active mining environment. Its performance in the Hormuz environment, the strong currents, poor visibility, variable depths, and potential IRGC interference is completely untested. America is deploying its most cutting-edge mine hunting technology for the very first time in a live combat environment against a minefield of unknown composition laid by an adversary using weapons developed over 4 decades in some of the most challenging underwater conditions on Earth. This is not a clean, scripted military operation. This is a live-fire experiment conducted in real time, with trillion-dollar global economic consequences riding on every pass. Iran's arsenal of cheap, short-range, low-flying drones has proven able to slip past expensive and sophisticated American anti-missile systems. Retired Navy Rear Admiral Mark Montgomery stated, "I wouldn't want to hold anything in the region until we fix our counter-UAS interceptor problem." A retired Rear Admiral of the United States Navy is publicly saying that American forces cannot safely hold positions in the Strait until a fundamental vulnerability in their air defense architecture is resolved. The era of the aircraft carrier as an unchallengeable power projection tool, the cornerstone of American strategic dominance for 80 years, is being stress tested against swarms of Iranian loitering munitions that cost less than a mid-sized sedan. The IRGC launched 21 confirmed attacks on merchant ships in the Strait during the conflict, 21 attacks on civilian commercial vessels with drones, missiles, and drone boats. The USS Frank E. Peterson and USS Michael Murphy transited the Strait, and as they crossed, the IRGC challenged them directly on radio. This is the last warning. This is the last warning. Iranian media reported that the destroyers turned around after the IRGC launched a drone in their direction. 2 American guided missile destroyers, among the most capable surface combatants in the world, turned around in a 21-mile strait after a confrontation with Iranian Revolutionary Guard forces. That is the geopolitical reality as of right now. When the U.S. cleared Kuwait's minefields in 1991, it was working against a static threat. Iraq had stopped mining, the locations were roughly known, and the task was methodical elimination. In the Strait of Hormuz in April 2026, the minefield is dynamic. Mines are being added, mines are drifting, and the entity that planted them cannot produce a chart showing where they all are, even if it wanted to. The IRGC retains the capacity to add more mines overnight. The comparison to Operation Earnest Will in 1987 or the 1991 Gulf War mine clearance is completely inapplicable. This is not a static tactical problem. This is a living, evolving, self-replenishing strategic trap, and Iran holds the only key that could theoretically open it, except that key is broken, and Iran itself is not sure where all the pieces are. IRGC Commander Major General Ali Abdullahi stated that Iran's armed forces will not allow any exports or imports to continue in the area of the Persian Gulf, the Sea of Oman, and the Red Sea if the U.S. blockade continues. Persian Gulf, Sea of Oman, Red Sea. That is not a Hormuz threat. That is a regional maritime system threat. This is Iran escalating its declared zone of economic disruption to encompass nearly every critical waterway connecting the Middle East to global commerce. Iranian parliament's deputy speaker Ali Niqzad told supporters that Iran considers control over the Strait of Hormuz a sovereign and legal matter and declared, "We will never give concessions to our enemy." IRGC-affiliated state media and members of parliament have pushed the narrative that Iran has the upper hand after surviving 40 days of war with military superpowers. That narrative is not irrational. It is grounded in operational reality. Iran absorbed Operation Epic Fury. Its IRGC command structure is functionally intact. Its mine warfare capability is operational. Its drone industrial base is producing faster than American counter-UAS systems can interdict. And it is still controlling who pays what to transit a waterway that moves 1/5 of the world's oil. According to data from KPLR, only 9 vessels have crossed the strait daily on average since the ceasefire, compared with pre-war traffic of more than 130 ships per day. 9 versus 130. That is a 93% collapse in through traffic on the most important oil corridor on the planet. And even those 9 ships face a brutal commercial calculus. A VLCC valued at $120 million faces a single transit war risk premium of $3.6 to $6 million, making many voyages commercially unviable even if a captain were willing to risk the passage. Several major insurers have excluded the strait entirely from standard coverage, requiring bespoke war risk policies that take days to arrange. The market is not waiting for political resolution. The market has already priced Iran's control of Hormuz as a permanent structural condition, not a temporary emergency. And when markets move, they move faster than armies. Tehran's toll system has introduced a new legal risk. Vessels that pay the Revolutionary Guard for safe passage could be seen as violating U.S. or European Union sanctions on Iran, further deterring operators. This is the genius of the trap in its final, most diabolical form. Iran has constructed a situation where commercial vessels are simultaneously threatened with Iranian attack if they don't pay, threatened with U.S. interdiction and sanctions liability if they do pay, and threatened by uncharted mines if they attempt to transit without permission from either party. Shipping companies will continue to avoid the strait as long as Tehran maintains its capability to credibly threaten commercial shipping. If you move your ship and you're halfway through the Hormuz Channel and the ceasefire breaks down, your seafarers are then in a shooting gallery, one maritime analyst stated. The entire global shipping industry, an industry that moves 80% of world trade, is now held in a state of frozen paralysis by a 21-mile passage controlled by a country that Washington declared defeated. The ceasefire, which was scheduled to lapse on April 21st if the two countries don't reach an agreement, has been described by analysts as a shaky truce, with Trump declining to rule out deploying ground troops into Iran. Plans discussed within the administration include an attack on Iran's principal oil depot at Karg Island or a ground operation to seize parts of the strait's coastline inside Iran. An Iranian parliament spokesperson warned that Trump's blockade threat was a bluff rather than a reality, and that Iran may also reveal other cards that we have not yet used in this game. Other cards from a country that just survived 40 days of air war, controls a critical global waterway, has mined it in a way that even it cannot fully reverse, has split the Western alliance, secured a Russian and Chinese veto shield at the UN, and is now charging million-dollar tolls to tankers while daring the most powerful navy on earth to do something about it. The mine-laying pattern during the ceasefire is the most concrete evidence yet of a split between Iran's diplomatic apparatus and the IRGC's operational command, a fracture that has shaped every phase of this war. The IRGC Navy declared that the strait will never return to its previous status, a direct contradiction of the ceasefire text that Iran's diplomatic team agreed to 4 days earlier. This is not ambiguity or miscommunication. It is two Iranian power structures pursuing opposite objectives through the same waterway. Washington is not negotiating with Iran. Washington is negotiating with half of Iran, and the half that agreed to a ceasefire, while the other half continues to lay mines and launch drones and challenge American destroyers on radio with the words, "This is the last warning." And the catastrophic system-level failure at the heart of U.S. strategy is that there is no diplomatic mechanism, no military instrument, and no economic pressure point that can resolve that internal Iranian fracture from the outside. Here is where we are as of this moment: a ceasefire that expires April 21st, a minefield that cannot be charted, a toll system that sanctions prohibit paying, a blockade that the UK won't join. France is actively working around. Spain has condemned, Russia has warned against, and China is exploiting as cover for its own parallel maneuvers in the South China Sea. Analysts say that even when all blockades are lifted, it will take time for traffic to return to pre-war levels, and that confidence depends on a delicate balance. Any attempt by Iran to keep restricting passage risks collapsing the ceasefire altogether, while full reopening removes their last remaining leverage. Iran is not trying to win this war in the traditional sense. Iran is trying to make the cost of not dealing with Iran on Iran's terms permanently, structurally, economically unbearable for the entire planet. And right now, as 9 tankers trickle through a strait that used to carry 130 a day, that strategy is working. 21 miles. That is what the most powerful military in the history of Earth cannot control today. And when historians look back at this moment, not at the airstrikes, not at Operation Epic Fury, not at the diplomatic summits in Islamabad, they will point to this: a country that had its supreme leader neutralized, its military struck from the air for 40 consecutive days, its economy sanctioned into the ground, and that country responded by laying mines in 21 miles of international water and charging the world $1 million per ship for the privilege of existence. The age of military supremacy as the ultimate guarantor of global order just took a catastrophic hit, and the invoice is being denominated in oil.